Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive.
Glad to be here.
This is the Olive Grove podcast, and today we're digging into a really fascinating bit of history, the Book of Judges, Chapter 1.
That's right. Sometimes it's called The Failures of Men.
Yeah, quite a title.
It really gives us a deep look into this crucial time right after Joshua dies. You see how Israel starts to, well, kind of slide from God, leading them directly to more self-rule. Compromises start creeping in.
So our mission today.
Our mission, I think, is to pull out some key lessons here about leadership, about faith, and, what happens when we compromise. Stuff that's still really relevant.
Absolutely. Okay, let's jump in. We're basically going to walk through the chapter verse by verse, more or less.
Sounds good.
So Judges 1, verse 1. Joshua's gone, and the people ask God, Adonai, hey, who should go up first to fight the Canaanites?
And the text flags this as, a good thing.
Right. They actually ask God first. That's how it's supposed to work.
Exactly. Life in the Promised Land, it was meant to be God-led. He's with them, leading the way. It's kind of a picture for us, isn't it? Our life, this side of heaven, guided by the Spirit.
Our promised land, so to speak.
Yeah, as we're getting ready for what's next. It's about relying on that divine guidance.
But then, verse 2 and 3, things get a bit complicated almost immediately.
They do. God gives the clear answer. Judah, you go. I've handed the land over to him. Crystal clear.
No ambiguity there.
None. But what does Judah do? They immediately turn to their brother tribe, Simeon, and say, hey, come with us.
Which, sounds okay. Teamwork, fellowship.
You'd think so. But the text is pretty blunt. It says this wasn't good because, and this is the key phrase, they did not trust in God.
Oh, wow. So even asking for help can be a lack of trust if God's already given the word.
Precisely. It raises that question for us, doesn't it? How often do we get a clear word from God, maybe through Scripture or the Spirit's prompting, and then we immediately look for human confirmation or human strength to back it up?
Oof.
Christian fellowship is vital, of course, for encouragement, support. But our actual strength, our ability to, walk this path faithfully, that comes from Him, relying on human strategy over His promise. It's a subtle shift.
A dangerous one, it seems.
It sets a precedent.
Okay, so despite that shaky start, they do go forward, Judah and Simeon. Verses 4 to 7 talk about a big victory.
A significant one. 10,000 men killed, and they capture this king, Adoni-Bezek.
Right, and this is a really wild part. This Adoni-Bezek, he wasn't just any king.
No, he was a major player. Apparently, he defeated 70 other kings before, and he had this brutal signature move.
Cutting off their thumbs and big toes.
Yeah.
Horrifying.
Truly. But here's the kicker. When Judah captures him, they do the exact same thing to him.
And his reaction?
It's stunning.
Yeah.
He basically says, yep, I had this coming. God has paid me back. He explicitly recognizes the God of Israel, the one true God, is behind this justice.
A pagan king acknowledging God's direct payback.
It's powerful. It shows that God's principles, his sense of justice, they operate universally. Even people outside the covenant could see it. You reap what you sow.
That's a heavy point right at the start. Okay, moving on. Verses 8 to 10. Judah attacks Jerusalem.
They capture it, fight hard, even set it on fire. Looks like another win.
But there's a catch. The text says they conquered it, but they did not occupy the city.
Right. They didn't hold the territory. It wouldn't be fully Israelite until, King David's time.
Yep.
Much later.
So they win the battle, but don't secure the place. That seems incomplete.
It's hugely significant. It foreshadows this theme running through the whole chapter. Partial obedience, half measures. And these always lead to problems down the road. It's not enough to just fight. You have to take possession of what God gives.
Leaving the job half done. Okay, verses 11 to 16. This is the bit with Caleb and Othniel and Oxa.
Yeah. Caleb offers his daughter Oxa to whoever captures the city, Kiryat Sefer. Othniel, his relative, pulls it off.
And then Oxa, Othniel's new wife, she goes to her dad, Caleb, and asks for more land, specifically land with water springs.
And Caleb gives it to her. Seems generous, right? A father providing for his daughter.
It does, but the commentary here calls this a failure of the leaders of Israel, specifically Caleb's failure. Why?
Because, again, there's no mention of seeking God's guidance. It seems like a standard cultural practice, maybe a land deal or dowry arrangement. But the point is, did Caleb stop to ask God, is this your will?
So even doing something seemingly good or culturally normal
can be a failure if it bypasses dependence on God. It's about the heart attitude. Is our first instinct to rely on human wisdom, tradition, our own judgment, or to turn to him. It's subtle.
Very subtle. Okay, verses 17 to 18. Judah and Simeon keep winning, taking Philistine cities, securing trade routes. They seem pretty powerful.
They definitely had momentum. God was clearly blessing many of their efforts.
But then, verse 19, this feels like a real turning point. It says, Adonai was with Yehuda, Judah, and they took possession of the hill country. So far, so good.
Right. God's presence, their success.
Because they could not drive out the inhabitants of the valley, since they had iron chariots.
Ah, there it is. The big but.
The iron chariots.
This is crucial. This is the explanation given for Judah's failure to completely obey, to take all the land God promised. They hit an obstacle, advanced military tech for the time, and they stopped.
Even though God was with them.
Exactly. God was with them. They took the hills, but the chariots in the valley, that seemed too hard. They compromised. They settled.
And the text calls this one of the main limitations of men as leaders, this willingness to compromise when things look tough.
It really is. And think about the implications. For Israel, this compromise meant leaving pockets of resistance, sources of future conflict and temptation, right in their midst. For us, we face our own iron chariots, don't we?
Yeah. Obstacles, challenges, things that seem too big, too entrenched.
And do we trust God's promise even then, or do we pull back? Settle for less than he intended. It's about whether we let the perceived power of the obstacle outweigh the proven power of God.
Heavy stuff. And it doesn't stop with Judah, does it? The chapter then gives us this parade of failures.
It really does. It shows this wasn't just Judah, it was spreading. Verse 21, Benjamin fails to drive the Jebusites out of Jerusalem.
There's Jerusalem again, still not fully secured.
Reinforces that point. It's becoming a pattern, a systemic issue.
Then, verses 22 to 26, the house of Joseph, Ephraim, and Manasseh, they attack Bethel.
But notice how they do it. They use spies. Human strategy. The implication is they're trusting in the eyes of men, not God's wisdom.
And God lets them win, sort of. They take the city.
But they make a deal.
Yeah.
They spare one man and his family who showed them the way in.
What does that guy do?
He goes off and founds a new city called Luz, which was the old name for Bethel. He basically restarts the very Canaanite presence they were supposed to eliminate.
So even when their human plan kind of worked, it still led to compromise.
It raises that question again. Does success through human means, even if God allows it, equate to his perfect will? Or is it just him working despite our imperfect obedience?
The list just keeps going. Verses 27-28, Manasseh fails to drive people out. Instead,
Forced labor. They put the Canaanites to work.
which the text calls a compromise they justified in their own minds. Sounds familiar.
Doesn't it? And verse 29, Ephraim does the same. And there's a chilling note there. Ephraim would be the first tribe to really fall into idolatry.
Wow, the connection is right there.
It's stark. And then verses 30-33, it's like rapid fire. Zebulun, Asher, Naphtali, same story. Didn't drive them out, lived among them, put some to forced labor.
They probably thought they were doing okay, right? Managing the situation.
Probably. Maybe they saw it as practical, even victorious in a sense. But it wasn't the total victory God commanded.
And a consequence.
Living among the Canaanites, adopting their ways, it says it would come back to haunt them. Idolatry was inevitable once they started compromising. Small steps lead to a huge fall.
It's relentless. And it ends with Dan, verses 34-36. What happens there?
It's almost the reverse. The Amorites actually pushed the tribe of Dan back into the hill country. They couldn't even hold their ground in the lowlands.
So the Canaanites are setting boundaries inside the promised land.
Exactly. The failure is so complete by this point. The enemy is dictating terms within the land God gave them.
So what's the big takeaway from this whole chapter, this catalog of failures?
I think it's that these compromises, these decisions to stop short, to rely on human strength or wisdom, to tolerate what God said to remove, they weren't small things. They had massive long-term consequences.
Lasting consequences.
Absolutely. The text even hints that the disputes over the land of Israel today have roots in these ancient failures to fully possess and obey. What isn't dealt with properly just festers and grows.
That's sobering. It really shows how human failure, even with God's help nearby, can just cascade.
It does. And the lesson for us, for you listening, it's got to be about radical trust. Complete trust in God's word, his strength, even when things look impossible, like those iron chariots.
Resisting that urge to compromise, to settle for partial obedience.
Because the long-term cost is just too high. Relying on ourselves or human counsel over God's clear direction, this chapter shows where that leads.
Thinking about God's faithfulness despite human failings reminds me of something.
Oh, yeah.
Our friends at Enduring Freedom Ministries, EFM, they've put together this book called Misfits for Jesus.
Ah, yes, I've heard about that.
It's basically true stories, accounts of people experiencing Jesus in really powerful, sometimes unexpected ways. It's such a good reminder that God is still working miracles, still reaching people, even in our messy world.
That sounds incredible.
Yeah.
Like echoes of the divine power we see or should have seen more of back in Judges.
Exactly. If you're interested, you can find Misfits for Jesus, true accounts of people experiencing Jesus on Amazon. It's really encouraging stuff.
Good to know. And speaking of EFM and tangible faith in action,
Yeah.
they're actually working on something really significant right now, tying back to the very land we're discussing. They're aiming to establish a food pantry in Jerusalem.
Wow, in Jerusalem itself.
Yes, to support people in need right there in that historic, crucial city. It feels like a beautiful way to, counter some of those ancient themes of failure with modern acts of faith, provision, and obedience to God's heart for the vulnerable.
That's fantastic. So if folks feel led to help with that, how can they?
They can check out the Enduring Freedom Ministries website. There's info there on the Jerusalem Food Pantry Project and how people can donate or get involved. It's a practical way to make a difference.
Definitely worth looking into. Okay, so wrapping up our dive into Judges 1, any final thoughts?
Just that core lesson again. Trust and obey. Fully don't settle.
Right. So here's maybe a provocative thought for you, the listener, to chew on. The Israelites had a literal promised land. God told them, take it, it's yours, drive everyone out.
Clear instructions.
What's the promised land God has given you? Maybe it's a calling, an opportunity, a spiritual inheritance. And where are your iron chariots?
What are those things that seem too big, too scary, that make you want to stop short, to compromise, instead of fully stepping into what God has for you?
And remember what Adoni Betzek said. God has paid me back in accordance with what I did. That principle of consequences. How does that play out in our own choices, our obedience, or our lack of it?
It's a powerful principle to reflect on. May these stories really push us towards deeper trust and bolder action in faith.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We really hope exploring Judges 1 together has sparked some new insights for you.
Absolutely. It's rich material.
If you found this helpful, please subscribe to the Olive Grove podcast on YouTube so you don't miss our next deep dive.
Keep seeking Him.
Until next time, keep digging for knowledge.